issues that you all are experiencing that are associated with the landfill, and we're just going to give you a quick update. I do have two individuals on. One I believe is from CDC, and I'm not sure who the other person is on the line as well. If you all could just introduce yourselves, who's on the call?
Sure. My name is Bob Helverson. I am a regional representative, environmental health scientist. I work for the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, APSDR. We're part of the non-infectious disease side of the CDC.
Good evening, this is Carl Markevitz. I'm a toxicologist. I'm also with the Region 3 ATSDR office.
Well, I appreciate you all being on the call. I do know Laura Warner. She was going to try to be on the call. She's with CDC as well. Her name is the one who is mentioned on the documents in regards to the EPA report that was put out. But here's how I want to handle tonight. I want to give everyone an update of where we're at and what we're doing and what we plan on doing over the next several weeks and months. And then I'll open it up for questions, and you can ask questions of our representatives on the phone. I've also got Ernie Hoke here. He's with Draper Aiden. Zach Miller, he is our environmental and safety engineer out at the landfill, and then Wallace McCulloch, our public works director, here as well. So, I watched the online forum about what's happening at the landfill and what everybody's experiencing. And over the past several days, I've noticed things have been not good, according to what people are saying. And I have not had an opportunity this time to be out there this past weekend to smell it like I normally do, but that was just simply because of some personal issues. I was not able to get out. But I do want to let people know what we are doing. So tonight, the City Council will have a request of a little over $1 million to do some items at the landfill. One of those items is putting in 17 gas wells, and that will probably cost close to $500,000. We will also, part of that funding will also include having a solid waste disposal fund director. That person will be completely in charge of the landfill. Right now, the landfill falls under the purview of Wallace McCulloch, but Wallace has probably the biggest department in the city. And what we're going to do is separate that off and have one person solely dedicated to making sure that we're doing what we need to do at that landfill. Next, we will have 4 full-time employees that we will hire. They will be solely dedicated to make sure that we are covering the landfill. And when I say cover the landfill, that means we are putting clay on top of the landfill in order to seal in the gas that is escaping from the landfill. Once you put clay on top of the landfill, that allows the gases to hopefully stay in the landfill and the new gas wells to extract that gas and send it to the Ingenco facility or to the flare. We also have an additional bulldozer that we are leasing specifically for landfill cover issues. We will have additional fuel that will be associated with the dozer and the equipment that we're running up there. We are also looking into purchasing an odor mitigation system. And I know people have put online that they're concerned about the odor mitigation system. They are thinking this system is just going to be like a Febreze plug-in that's just going to mask the odors. That's not my intention. My intention is that we make sure that we get a system that is going to break down the methane and the hydrogen sulfide that is escaping from the landfill. It does us no good, it does you no good to have a system that is just going to allow the odors to be masked and you're still breathing everything that's in the air. So what we want to do, this system will hopefully break down those chemicals. We have, I think they've been out to the site, they've reviewed the site. We're going to do a 30-day test with them, I believe is my understanding. And but that system's not in place yet. I'm not exactly sure when we can get that in place, but that is coming up in the next several weeks, or maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So total expenditures is a little over $1 million that we're getting ready to fund over the next several weeks for this landfill. It's my hope over the next 4 to 6 weeks that you all will get to see a significant difference in the odors that's emanating from the landfill. We anticipate the landfill gas wells company to come in on August 23rd and begin work. So you're not going to see a difference tomorrow. You're not going to see a difference Wednesday. We're hoping after August 23rd, when they start putting in those gas wells, it'll probably take 4 to 6 weeks after August 23rd that we start seeing that difference. Some of the things that we've done over the past month, I've had a crew working nonstop on continuing to put cover on the landfill. That's an issue that has to be addressed, and we are addressing that. We have also, we're continually monitoring everything that's going on in regards to the wells around the landfill to make sure that there's not anything escaping in the groundwater. I know that's been a concern, and we're not seeing anything that's unusual that alarms us. I also know there's an individual who does not want to be named yet, but he has privately tested water over on the Tennessee side near Boer Road and in Middlebrook Lake. And based on the test results he has, those results have come back just fine as well. So I will open it up to questions if anybody has any right now. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
We need to get you on the mic so the people on.
You mentioned groundwater testing. One of my questions had to do with any runoff that might go into the sewer system and whether or not we might be receiving any gases. Does that go to the waste treatment? What happens to any runoff that comes from there? And like I said, I'm a little concerned that it goes to a waste treatment, or if might not be getting any of that odor coming into our houses that way.
Are you talking about surface runoff or?
However it might enter into the sewer system.
Sure. The water that enters into the sewer system from the landfill, and I'll let Ernie chime in here at some point if I don't get this 100% correct, but when it rains, all that water goes into the rock quarry. And there's a liner, and we have some pumps at the bottom of that landfill that will pump that water and the leachate from the landfill out of the landfill and into the sewer system. So, and then it dissipates as it goes from the landfill all the way down to the sewer treatment plant on the Bristol, Tennessee side.
The benzene.
Do what?
Did I read some that the benzene levels were high?
The benzene levels are high as they're coming out of the landfill. As it progresses through the system, it gets diluted.
They were high at the sewer plant, according to the article.
They are out.
They pay a fine or something.
They are above the limit that the landfill set on itself and BVU set on itself in the early 2000s. And I think it's 0.07 parts per million?
Yes.
Yeah, 0.07 parts per million. My understanding, Ernie, correct me if I'm wrong, that is not outside of any sort of regulation other than what we set for ourselves back in the early 2000s.
So the benzene level is high at the landfill, and we have been testing it along the line. So we've tested it at the landfill, we've tested it at the state line, and we've tested it down into Tennessee. Ultimately, it goes to wastewater treatment plant. They're not having a problem with it at the wastewater treatment plant. And again, that's 20 miles away. We are looking at the concentrations of it that are high at the landfill and then break down as it gets diluted through the system. The air samples that we took over top of this flow of wastewater indicated that they were below the hazardous waste limits when they got down to the Tennessee line, that they've been dissipated. They're high, they're marginally unacceptable air limits at the landfill, and we are looking at ways to mitigate that. But that is within the sewer system line itself. So are the odors coming out of the sewer system? We did a lot of work trying to figure that out if that was possible. And everything that we've seen so far is that it's not coming out of the sewer lines anywhere in the collection system. Certainly not in the Tennessee side either, because by the time liquid gets to Tennessee, it's very diluted. There's a very large pipe of other sewer and other water that it mixes with. The area that's been experiencing the problems over here in Tennessee is actually up gradient from the sewer line. So your sewer from the Tennessee side, where there's been the highest complaints, is actually draining down toward the city. And liquid runs that way and then runs down along the creek is where their main sewer line is. So we have looked at that, and we continue to look at that, and we are working on getting the benzene levels lower through a number of different things.
Can you speak to what that number of different things are?
Well, one is remediation. So basically, how do we get the benzene out of the and it's in the gradient water, which is basically groundwater. It's very deep below the landfill is where we're picking it up from. We're not certain where it's coming from. It's been there for a while. It's been elevating along for a period of time. None of the wells around the landfill are indicating that it's leaving the landfill area where the quarry is, and we're not certain even how it got there. It is really quite a mystery. So the way we remediate it is we either filter it or we airstrip it. We basically allow it to aerate, but then if we allow it to aerate, we have to capture the air through a filter so it doesn't go into the atmosphere, and then treat that. Then the liquid is basically stripped of the benzene, continues down along the line. Any polluted air that is captured now in a closed system, then those filters are disposed of. We're working on that, actually, have been working on that possibility for a while. We're trying to determine how much flow we have to deal with. There's a lot of liquid that comes out of the landfill that goes to the wastewater treatment plant. But your other point about stormwater, a little different story. All the stormwater from rain is going into the landfill. Anything around the landfill goes into a stormwater basin, and those are monitored on a regular basis that haven't shown any anomalies at all either through the testings.
Yes, sir.
How do you keep that from venting back out to a vent on a house? If it's coming through the sewer, yes, it goes downhill, but it also vents back out. I know when they smoke the sewer system, I look up at my house and smoke's coming out of it. What keeps that benzene from coming out all the way down that line, all the way through Tennessee, all the way to the wastewater treatment?
Well, that's what we checked. And so when we checked it at the landfill, and then we checked it down at Moore Street at the state line. What happens to the sewer line is a relatively small line that comes out of landfill and connects to an interceptor. The interceptor is 42 inches around, it's a big line, full of water almost all the time. That's where it gets diluted. We tested the air in the middle of the night, the slowest time of flow, the least amount of dilution. And that air sample in that pipe was not at any dangerous levels. We did detect some benzene, but not at any dangerous level. And again, the flow is right over here on Moore Street and kind of heads straight down. So we did look at that early on. Is that possible? A dry vent in your house, possibly? Now, it's certainly possible that you're getting sewer gases coming up in your house if you have an old drain, if you hadn't put water in that drain for a while, and everybody should look at that. Sometimes you have a drain you forgot in the basement. You could be picking up sewer gases, but they're sewer gases. You're too far away from the interceptor and too diluted that you would get any benzene at your house unless you were literally over top of that line, and the complaints that we're having are nowhere near that line.
I'll touch on the benzene issue as well. Ernie had mentioned, how do we get rid of the benzene? We are looking at two possibilities right now. One is a pretreatment facility, which we would have to purchase. My guess is that would be another $1 million or more for that facility. Another option is the air stripping, which we're working on those numbers, but it would be an expensive fix as well. But it's something we have to fix, and we plan on fixing that. It's just the process. I know they still have to do more testing to figure out exactly how much flow it is and how much we would need to, how big of a storage tank we would need. But that is something we will be addressing. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, so I had not read the article about benzene. I had not heard a single thing about benzene till this meeting, and I'm a science teacher. That word benzene, it's a frightening word. Is that typically a landfill issue? Or is this another kind of weird quarry, no escape kind of, has it captured? Anyway, I know you don't know where it came from, but
Well,
is benzene something that was on your radar?
Benzene, we have picked up benzene in this system for at least 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. But it has never been to the point where we have to do anything about it. Now we've gotten to a point where we have to correct it. And the issue is, where's it coming from? It could be coming from an old facility somewhere outside of the landfill. The landfill is the lowest point for that groundwater anywhere. So all the groundwater goes to that landfill. And if it's in there, we don't know how it's getting, because at least from what we know, there's no one dumping anything in the landfill that would create a benzene issue. So it could be something old that is just now getting to our landfill because groundwater does not move as quickly as a river. It moves very slow, and it could be something that's a mile or 2 miles away from the landfill.
When you're talking about the benzene levels are not something that's of immediate concern. Are you talking levels that would, in a workplace for OSHA violations, would cause evacuation? Or are we looking at levels that, for long-term chronic exposure, are a concern?
You know, probably the best people to answer that is ATSDR, who's on the phone. I don't know if they've probably seen some of those reports. Would either one of you two individuals like to answer a question or maybe give a little more in-depth explanation about benzene
Sure.
and the limits?
Yeah, sure. This is Bob Halverson, and if we get into any talk discussion, I will defer to Carl, the toxicologist. But you know, benzene is not something that's it's not uncommon to see benzene at different levels in landfill samples. But we need to talk about exposure. You know, the pathway of exposure. Because you detected it on a landfill doesn't mean that you're in the community being exposed. So there has to be an exposure pathway before you can actually have health effects from that chemical. So we do want to know, it would be important to know if those odors, for instance, coming through, like a good question that we heard earlier about the sewer system, could those vapors get up and into the communities where exposure could occur? And that's certainly a possible pathway, but it sounds like you're looking at that, and there are some, when you talk about sewer pipes, they do have some backflow preventers and ways to keep gases from getting up into your house where you get exposed. And I should say that benzene is a very common exposure chemical. Every time you pump your gas, you're getting, parts per million exposure when you're pumping that gas. So that's a pretty high and very short-term exposure that you don't typically see any kind of health effects from that kind of exposure. Worker exposure is a different story. When you're working on a site with benzene, and you start to see regular 8-hour, 10-hour exposures to higher levels of benzene, then it can become a health concern. So it really is about the exposure pathway. We do expect to see benzene at landfills. This is something that's in a lot of waste. So you will see it. And when you sample for it, we're talking about analytical methods that detect parts per billion, very, very low levels that we don't expect to see health effects from. So, it really comes down to that exposure and how much you get exposed to it, where, this is what we're looking at, and those samples that the EPA, working with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, they collected samples in the community, looking, one of the chemicals that they took full air samples, 24-hour samples, was for benzene. And the levels we saw are not of acute exposure concern. We are in a process right now, though, where we'll be looking further into the data as we continue to receive the data set. So we'll do more assessment of this data as it comes in, but we do not see levels of benzene, especially, that are of health concern at this point.
Hello, I live in Forest Hills on the Bristol, Tennessee side, and I'm just wondering how extensive is the monitoring that's taking place on the Tennessee side? And where exactly are the monitoring stations located?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what Tennessee is doing on their side. The EPA, they just concluded their test, and from what I've been told, the EPA has now taken their equipment off-site, and it is no longer anywhere in the area at this point.
Okay, so if I'm concerned about benzene and the noxious chemicals and fumes that I'm experiencing in the morning and the evening, it's not a Bristol, Virginia concern. I need to contact Bristol, Tennessee.
Now, I don't want anyone to think that I don't say that that's a Bristol, Tennessee concern, because we are one community. And
Okay.
this is an issue that, not only are we dealing with on the Bristol, Virginia side, we know it's impacting Bristol, Tennessee as well. What we have done since December, we have taken air samples on the Virginia and Tennessee side on numerous occasions. And from my recollection, I don't have those reports in front of me, but I don't think we've ever seen benzene on any of our air sample reports. I know the EPA has picked up low levels of benzene in the air, but I think on some of our samples, I don't think we picked up any, but don't hold me to that because I don't have those reports in front of me.
Okay, and benzene isn't the only chemical that I'm concerned about, but what concerns me most is I haven't had anyone come and speak to me and say, hey, these are some things you might want to be concerned about. We've seen that you've reported noxious fumes, chemicals, and things like that. And I really want the air quality to be tested in my neighborhood. My neighborhood is filled with kids, kids that spend a lot of time outside until the fumes became too noxious and they be outside. But we have several of those children here today, and I'm concerned developmentally what might happen to them from exposures to chemicals. And I would like to invite the city to come and set up a monitoring station in my front yard. I would love it.
What's your street?
Sparkling Brook Drive. I've had to leave my home at 5 a.m. several mornings recently because the fumes enter into the house and they make me so sick that I have to leave. So I think I've got a pretty strong constitution, but it's been so bad that I can't stay in my...
as well, 117 Shady Lane.
I cannot stay in my home.
If you're doing Forest Hills, do the low part and high part. You can see it from next door to us. Right there.
Well, and,
Now a fair amount to it.
what we've done, we have been out there taking air samples. As I said, we've taken air samples since December. I can't say that I've taken it in front of your house or where we've taken those samples. I don't have that information in front of me, but we have taken air samples throughout that entire area since December, January. Yes, sir.
Are y'all doing anything any different at any different times? I mean, I get out at 5 o'clock in the morning and walk. I live on Taylor, right next to King College. And I get out there and some mornings, I got a gag as I'm walking. I mean, it's that bad. Other mornings I go out there, it's like a beautiful summer day. There's nothing in the air.
Operationally, we are not doing anything different than we've done for the past 20 years when it comes to the landfill. The landfill opens in the morning around 7:30 when trucks start coming in. Last truck, I think, comes in around 4 in the afternoon. And we have some workers there till about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. But after 5 o'clock, we do not have anyone there doing anything that would create this. I know people think we're flipping a switch. There's no switch that we're flipping. It's just the unfortunate circumstances of the timing, that it appears it's either early in the morning or late in the evening, and it's not because we're doing anything any different. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
Oh, is it possible that automating the gas collection system might help alleviate that, especially after hours?
Well, that gas collection system is working all the time, except when Ingenco has to shut down for a period of time for either maintenance that they're doing. But as soon as it's shut down, the gas is diverted to the flare and is burned off at the flare.
But is that a manual process or automatic?
No, there is someone that turns that flare on.
At 2 in the morning?
If it has to be turned on at 2 in the morning, it's turned on.
They're there at 2 in the morning waiting.
We have an hour per DEQ that if Ingenco shuts down, we have to turn the flare on within an hour.
So within that hour, are the gases escaping? Is that why we're experiencing more late at night during the mornings?
Well, when you look at, and we've got reports that show the shutdowns of when Ingenco shuts down, we can share that with you. I don't think they're shutting down at those specific times.
I don't want to exceed my allotment of questions, but I have two.
Okay.
My first question is, and it relates to a point, I believe it's Danielle, or I don't, the lady that was speaking before about Bristol, Tennessee. I would like to know on the record, has there been any attempt by the City Council in Bristol, Virginia to reach out to Bristol, Tennessee, maybe to make a joint commission or look at this collectively because it is impacting both Virginia and Tennessee? Or have there been any attempts by the Bristol, Tennessee City Council to reach out to Virginia to deal constructively with this issue? The reason that I'm asking that is I've been in the Bristol, Tennessee Council meetings, and there doesn't seem to be any indication that they're interested in taking this question up. That's my first question. I do have a follow-up.
I'm Chad Key. We serve on the Bristol, Tennessee City Council. We are in constant contact with Randy and our city council members from Bristol, Virginia. We are monitoring the situation. Needless to say, we are very concerned about what is happening within the city. I believe, and I believe our other council members believe, that Randy and his staff are doing everything they possibly can to rectify the situation. I have seen air reports that dated back in December that they have forwarded to the Bristol, Tennessee City Council members. Randy's in contact with Bill Sore, our city manager, routinely. And so I want you to know that we are concerned, but we do believe that they are doing everything they can to provide an open book for everybody. And I hope that a meeting like this brings light on every aspect of what they're trying to do. So yes, Bristol, Tennessee is monitoring the situation. It's something that's happening in Bristol, Virginia, so it's difficult for us to control that. But we believe we're moving.
So this is my follow-up question. You know, you're saying you have collaboration on this point. Have there been attempts to reach out to the Tennessee Department of Environmental Quality or I believe it's TDEC Commission, I forget what it is, by Bristol, Tennessee to investigate this from the Tennessee side, other than just listening to the council here? Have there been proactive steps by Bristol, Tennessee to bring its state authorities, because this is an interstate issue with potential federal implication, which means you would need cooperation between the Virginia Department, Tennessee Department, EPA, things of that nature?
TDEC has been involved since, I'm going to say, January. They have been out taking air samples. I know they've been in contact with Virginia DEQ as well. So I'm not exactly sure what level TDEC is still involved, but I do know in the past they have been involved. You know, there was a company over in the Tennessee Industrial Park. I think a lot of people were complaining about it early on, and I know TDEC went out and inspected over at the industrial park. They didn't find any concerns at that time, and I think they've been out and about since then as well.
So you had mentioned Indeco, I don't know, and okay, so is that a company that is converting the gas into electricity?
That's correct.
Okay, so that was done, when did that start? Okay, so there's an article that said you picked April 18th, 2019, that at the end of the year, this company would start doing that, correct?
They've been at the landfill since 2014, 15, somewhere in there. So they've been operational for a period of time now. So I'm not exactly sure what that article was referencing, but they have been there for an extended period of time, collecting the methane and converting it to electricity.
Well, it was in the Bristol Herald Courier, and it says a Virginia firm expects to begin converting methane gas from the city's landfill into electricity by the year's end. And that article was dated April 18th, 2019. And
I don't know, is there a
Does it say what
correlation?
company? Does it mention in Jinko?
Uh-huh, right here. I think you wrote
That's the
the
guy that
article.
probably wrote it.
Because I remember covering a Genco out there, like you said, 4 or 5 years ago, so let me see.
Is this fake news, David?
Scroll up.
have that Sarah that's actually going on now, do we?
I just didn't know, it just seemed like this came out, and then all of a sudden, over that year after that is when there's like a timeline.
Right.
Like, I feel like it has gotten worse ever since we have a Forest Hills Facebook page, and it was like towards the end of 2020, I think Danielle and I were talking about it, and that's when we were supposed to call the person and let them know, I can't remember what his name was, and it's just, there does appear to be a correlation.
Tabitha was the city manager at that time, so how long ago was that?
She was here 14 through 17.
I'm not sure that date applies to when the article appeared.
That article sounds like it might have been around the time the contract was renegotiated.
Yes.
We did renegotiate the contract, but that had nothing to do with operation of Ingenco. That had something more to do with what the city was going to recoup from the gas that was being diverted to Ingenco.
Oh, it's not that.
So how much oversight does the city have on what Ingenco does?
Well, oversight, I wouldn't say that we have any oversight. However, they report to DEQ just like we do. And we work in conjunction with Ingenco because if they're not getting landfill gas, they're not producing electricity, which they don't like and TVA doesn't like because they have a contract with TVA that requires them to produce so much electricity. And since March, April, those gas numbers have significantly increased with some of the work that we've previously done, that we started back in January and worked through that through March and April. So we've almost doubled, I guess, the gas production out there, which has caused them to increase their electrical output. And that's something that's good because we need to be producing more gas, because if we're producing more gas, that means more gas is getting to Ingenco and not getting into.
Seems like our chemical sales have also doubled, so that's where I think we're all wondering if there's a correlation.
I guess anything's possible, but it's not because Ingenco just started. I mean, they've been there for an extended period of time.
Who was Mark Campbell?
He was the previous ENS compliance officer.
He cited in here too.
Okay.
I quoted him too, so I'll find out.
Brady, could you explain the duties of the EPA versus DEQ, federal, I mean, just exactly what they do? I mean, both, they're different agencies, federal, state. Can you just explain to everybody what?
I'll give a big overview of that. Well, actually, you're probably better suited to give that overview than I am.
So DEQ and Tennessee, TDAC, are responsible for enforcing the regulations, both water, air, for their respective commonwealths. The overarching authority, though, is federal government. So the EPA ultimately has EPA guidelines that they have to then enforce and make sure that they're complied to. So locally, the DEQ then is responsible for monitoring the results of all the monitoring wells around a landfill, the gas emissions off of a landfill, the flare emissions off of a flare if there's a flare, the Ingenco plant itself, which is under a separate permit. There's what's called a Title V air permit that's on this landfill. Title V air permit's required on any large producer of methane. It's again focused on methane, but methane you can't smell. But what's in addition to the methane is the other VOCs, the volatile organic chemicals. That's what you're smelling. Sometimes sulfur, sulfuric acid as well. But so they're responsible for that. They have to comply to these regulations that the EPA then ultimately has in place. EPA has been on site, as you know, doing the testing and has taken a look at that, working with both respective agencies to really see what the air quality was out in the community, and that's some of the folks on this call look at as well. So, you know, big picture, the state agencies kind of with the overarching federal EPA.
This is Helverson, if I can add to that
Sure.
a little bit
Yeah,
about
please do.
what we've been doing. You know, we're on the public health side, so we're not the regulators, but we have, you know, when we get involved with a site, you know, we can't just get involved with any site. We had a community member from from the area who asked for our input. And we began working with Virginia DEQ and EPA to develop plans to monitor the air. But we also reached out to our Tennessee Health Department associates and also our Region 4 ATSDR staff who are in Atlanta who work with Tennessee. And Tennessee is a state that's funded by ATSDR to do health assessment work. So we have been keeping them informed and we continue to work with them. And they may actually assist with writing this assessment, the review of the air data that we had collected, that EPA and DEQ had collected. They may actually write a document on that, but we're certainly keeping them in the loop about the data that we're collecting and any updates about the site work that we're doing.
Hi, I'd like to pivot just a second. Last month when we were here, several weeks ago, we talked about someone asked for maybe even air purifiers in their home. And Randy, I think at that time you said that it was ill-advised, that the city was advised not to provide any special accommodation. It could look like a liability. We trust our city council members to take care of our health, and I feel badly for you because you've had to become scientist and environmental specialist, and thank you. I know that that's a huge burden. But going back to the quality of life issues that we're all experiencing in Bristol, Virginia and Tennessee, we've got to be able to trust that you hear the human side too, not just the scientific piece. We are really struggling. Our home values are sinking. We can't go out at night. We're concerned. We don't have peace. I don't sleep very well. I don't care if the benzene, methane, whatever is not harming me. My oxygen drops. But besides the health issue, it's just the mental health issue of feeling like we have no control. Can we not have some accommodations for those of us who are struggling? I don't care if it's flower pots, better roads, just something. And I would think of the least thing that we could do that you provide to our city members are some air purifiers within the home. That doesn't seem like a deception. Deal with what we're dealing with in our community, in our backyard, our front yard, our front porch, inside my home. I don't have air conditioning. Then why can't you commit to doing that for us, some concessions, just out of the goodness and goodwill of saying, trust us. I mean, after all, these are our dollars too. We're putting into our city taxes just like our neighbors across the yard, across the street, across town, who don't have to deal with this. We need to see some evidence that on the human side that not only do you feel for us, but we'll get some accommodation. No one wants to sue the city. That's just suing ourselves. I don't know how everybody else feels, but that's the way I feel about it. But I sure would like to have an air purifier for my whole home.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and I really appreciate the comment that you make that you're suing yourself, and essentially that's what happens in a situation like this. And ultimately, I don't want anyone to sue the city or even take it to the point of even threatening litigation, because at the end of the day, we're here trying to serve you all to make sure that we're doing the right thing to correct this issue. I will continue to talk to my council about that request, whether it's an air purifier or some other request that we can come up with and figure out a way that we can do that makes sense for the city and makes sense for you all as well. I've been out there, I've smelled what everybody's smelling. I've been to the landfill, I've been out at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. I feel for you. I mean, I can't imagine having to sleep 8-10 hours and smell that, or live there for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't smell good. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. It smells bad, and I just wish that I could tell you all that by September 1st, all this would go away and everybody would be happy. I can't tell you that. Even in January, I mentioned back in January, I didn't know if what we were doing was going to fix the problem. And the hope was it would be fixed by March or April. Here we are, August, it's still not fixed. And I'm hoping that by mid-October, we have a fix to this and everybody's happy. I can't promise that. And I'm not going to sit here and promise that, because I don't know if what we're going to do is going to fix it. What I hope we're doing, everything that we've done since January, is building on the solution, and we may have to do more between now and the end of the year to get the solution so that you don't have to deal with it, but we are working on it. We're trying our best to fix this. But back to your comment, I will see what we can do to come up with some sort of accommodation.
What part does Ingenco play in the maintenance of the facility? Do they, the city maintains the piping, the pumps, the wells. What does Ingenco do? The generators?
They accept the gas, that's correct.
So we produce the gas, pump it to them, and they just accept it?
That's right.
All right, these wells that are being drilled, I assume that they're all vertical wells because it's a landfill or because it's a rockaway. What is the casing of that made out of? Is it a PVC, a steel casing?
It's both. So it just depends on where the well is located and the temperatures of the landfill and the certain areas where we're drilling the wells as to whether or not we use PVC or whether we use steel casing.
All right, I keep reading about condensation. Where's this condensation coming from? Is it groundwater?
Zach is really taking the lead. He came on board in mid-June. He's really taking the lead on the condensation. We're having tremendous condensation issues in those gas well lines, and he's taking the lead to attempt to alleviate some of that.
So the condensation, as they've mentioned, we do have a couple of wells with elevated temperatures. You have water in the bottom of this landfill naturally, and ideally you have pumps that will pump that water out. So the installation of these 17 wells is going to help us remove the water at the bottom of that landfill. So with these hot wells, you do have water in the bottom of them. That water evaporates, and when it climbs to the lines on top of the trash, it decreases in temperature significantly, and it's condensating in these lines. So the way to alleviate that is to create a consistent pitch in these lines that all the condensate will flow to the bottom of the landfill, where there is a sump pump that pumps it to a tank and pumps it out of the landfill, same place our leachate and gradient goes. So the landfill is settling at various rates. So if one of those collection pipes gets a valley in it, then the condensation can't travel downhill. So that's one thing we've really focused on since I've been here, and we've seen a tremendous increase in our gas quality and our quantity of gas since we have started heavily focusing on the gas wells and the collection system.
So that piping is buried, the piping coming from the wells and pumps?
Well, there's multiple ways you can do it. It can be below ground or it can be above ground. Right now, with the issues we're having, the lines are above the ground, so we can actually try and move the condensation. We're in very detailed discussion nearly every day with Draper Aiden, SCS, those are our two engineering firms, on how we're going to keep these new wells better maintained. We don't want these wells to end up the same way 2 or 3 of the other ones have. So we're very aware of the problems that we've had in the past, and we plan to move forward in a way that we won't experience these issues that we have experienced with our new system.
I'm still really concerned about the odor mitigation components, what you're going to use, and whether there's going to be a fragrance component to it at all. Can you clarify about that?
I'll let Ernie's had those discussions, so I'll.
So this is not covering up odors, it's actually breaking down the odors. So what it does is on a molecular state, it attacks the odors. They basically go after the odors.
I understand that.
Okay.
What I want to know is there going to be any fragrance
No,
component?
you would not smell anything. It'd be very localized. What we're doing right now is a pilot, and the pilot's a very small localized area where we know there's some odors on a regular basis from the landfill. So we're going to do a relatively small area with this. We're going to test the air before and after using this deodor. It's odor neutralizer. It's really not a deodorizer.
And what is that component?
Yeah, it's a proprietary chemical that they make. They use this for landfills all the time. You can actually drink it. It's not a chemical, a negative chemical. Okay, so And what it does is it attaches to these odor molecules and they essentially drop to the ground. If you could see them, that's what it would do. So it's not just making something smell better and then it floats away smelling better. It attacks it and it drops to the ground if it's working properly. The challenge with it is it has to be vaporized. We turn it into a vapor. The vapor has to then attach to the molecules, so it's very subjective to wind and current and where it's located, and so it's not an exact science. What can be exact is if we look at a small area, we can see how effective it is, and then we can see if we can scale it up. Typically, we'd scale it up when we had an area like an open face. So during the day, there's an area the size of this room that we're putting trash in. So we might want to concentrate an area where that's open to kill those odors that are coming out from that area. The rest of the landfill should be covered, as Randy's indicated, with a very thick cover if we're not using it regularly. And the gas well should be pulling enough gas out so the gas isn't trying to find the weakest spot in the landfill to then go out to the air to go into the communities.
Okay, I'm going to have one more question, and then we're going to have to start our city council meeting. And then afterwards, Ernie and Wallace will be here. If you all want to have any other questions, you're more than welcome to meet with them out in the hallway here. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I know that you all have been doing all that you can, and you've been having to work through a lot of different problems, but I'd like to say that you shouldn't forget the very real people that are affected by some of these decisions. And one of the comments earlier mentioned something about mental health about this. It's affecting a lot of people because we can't go outside a lot anymore at night because of the odor that is being created by the landfill. So I just want to say that you shouldn't forget about the people that are being affected by all of this. And just keep that in mind.
What's your name?
Hank Scanlon.
And Hank, how old are you?
11.
That is a very, very good comment, and that's something that you're exactly right. I mean, government is here to serve the people, and we should not forget about the people. And I can tell you that me and my staff, we recognize that there are issues. We recognize that it does play a role in how people feel at night. And I want to tell you and everybody else in this room that I wouldn't do this job if I didn't like serving people. And I want to make sure that everybody in this community, whether it's Bristol, Virginia, Bristol, Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, or Northeast Tennessee, they have the ability to have a good quality of life. And I know this is impacting your all's quality of life, and I'm committed to getting this issue resolved as quickly as I can. As I said, I wish I could flip a switch and turn it off, but there's no switch to flip on or off. It's just a situation that we're dealing with that has come to a head over 20 years, and we're trying to correct it as quickly as possible. But I hope one day that maybe you would like to come and spend some time with me and learn more about local government, and you might want to serve in one of these positions and be elected to a council position one day. So thank you. I will conclude this. As I said, Ernie and Wallace and Zach will be outside if anybody has any other specific questions. I want to say thanks to the folks from CDC, ATSDR that are on the phone. I appreciate them getting on the phone. I appreciate each and every one of you all coming out tonight. The next meeting like this will occur the first Tuesday or the second Tuesday in September, which I think is September the 8th, I think. When is our meeting? Yeah, the 14th. So it'd be September 14th will be our next meeting. And if there's any significant thing that happens between now and then, we do have the landfill site on our webpage. I would encourage you to sign up for those links. I'm also on the Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee air pollution community page. I think most of y'all, if you've been on that page, you know I engage and try to give you the information as quickly as I can. I'm not on Facebook 24/7, so I may see a comment 12 hours after it's posted, but I do try to answer any comment that I can directly answer. So thank you all for coming out.